Hey everybody, welcome to your horoscopes for the week. These are the horoscopes for the week ending February 18th, which is my birthday. Yay! May seem a little egotistical, but I am a firm believer that you should celebrate your own birthday. If you wait around for everybody else to do it, you stand a risk of getting disappointed. And who wants to get disappointed on their birthday? I mean, come on, it is your day. You got to make the most of it. So if it is your birthday this week, also happy birthday. I'll be celebrating with you. We are going to go ahead and jump into these horoscopes, and we are going to start, as we always do, with Aries. We continue to have Jupiter in Aries moving along there, moving into a sextile with Mars. Focus really is on your support system, and Jupiter is all about expansion and growing that support system. And I feel like this is really an important focus for Aries right now, because it's really important for Aries to have a support system. And yet many of the Aries that I know act like they don't need a support system. They have everything figured out and they don't need anything. But deep down inside, I think they really, really love and crave having those people around them to kind of hold them up, even if they're still independent. So that makes any sense at all. This sextile with Mars is your ruling planet, and Mars focus is all on self. So we're really looking at building a support system for ourselves, whether it's for your mental health, whether it's for your financial goals, your personal goals, your moving goals, whatever it is. This week really is the prime opportunity, not just for it to come up, but for you to open yourself up to receive this support. And understand that support comes in many different forms. So be very open to whatever possibility there is, even if the help is simply somebody that comes up to you and says, oh, you're waiting for the wrong bus. You need, such and such bus, like what happened in Forrest Gump, right? Of course, he had to sit there for hours and tell that story before she helped him, but still, you look for the good and not necessarily look for the bad, if that makes sense. Outside of that, nothing major going on for you guys. No difficult aspects with Jupiter. Everything is forward movement and very, very positive. So keep up the good work, guys. And that's what I have for you guys. And we're going to move on to Taurus. We continue to have Uranus in Taurus, and it is direct now. So we're moving along. Not that it's going to move along very quickly, unfortunately. We're going to kick off the week with the moon in opposition with Uranus, which is kind of frustrating just a little bit, or it's going to bring up some frustrations. And it's no fun to kick off the week with frustrations. But, unfortunately, it is what it is. Focus is on your secret closet, your trauma space, your inner trauma space. So unfortunately, this means triggers coming up. And when you have the moon involved, these can be very deeply emotional triggers. And these triggers are really centered around your day-to-day schedule. So it's instances of other people coming up and changing your plans, or people backing out of plans at the last minute. Really frustrating and annoying things. And if you're not in the right headspace, it can go from really just frustrating and annoying to really offensive really quick. So it's very, very important that you try and work through those emotions as much as possible, and definitely don't allow those emotions to react, because you could start a fight that you really don't want to start today. The good news is Uranus is sextile with, it looks like Venus, but it could be Neptune. It is Venus. Uranus is sextile with Venus. Actually, is a really awesome energy to put towards your career, and specifically the type of support that you have around your career. Now, again, we're centered in that trauma place. So what that means is we have a tendency to look to the past and look to see how much lack of support we had then and pertain that to now. And that does two things. One, it stops us from growing our support system. And two, it makes us blind to the support system that we really do have. And in many cases, not all cases, of course, but in many cases, a lot of the people that come to me and say, I have no support, nobody at all. And then you start to point out this person and this person and this person. And then they go, okay, well, I do have a little bit of support. I think sometimes we just spend too much time focused on what we don't have, and it leaves very little time for us to focus on what we do have. And this really is what this sextile is all about. It's sort of opening up the curtain and saying, hey, let's not look at the empty space over here. Let's look at the space where you do have one or two quality people that are there to support you in whatever way they can, or whatever way they know how, if that makes sense. So that's what I have for you guys. Yes, if triggers come up, being in that trauma place, and especially with a planet influencing it, does make it a little difficult. But in my view, as uncomfortable and as really annoying as it is, especially when you really can't control the timing of it, afterwards, after I sit and work through it, after I have my cry, after I, have my frustration and I'm punching stuff, I start to kind of sort of release it. Not feel great the rest of the day, but I swear the next day or the day after that, it does just feel like there's a huge weight off over your shoulders. So honestly, it sucks, but it's so worth it. And the more you do that, the lighter you feel every day, and the less that old BS is holding you back. And really, that's the purpose of this. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And we're moving on to Gemini. We continue to have Mars in Gemini. Mars is going to be in Gemini for a couple more months, and then finally we'll move on. Things will kind of die down a little bit. Having Mars in your sign, it's really like a blessing and a curse. For me personally, being a fixed sign, it is kind of a blessing because I don't get these huge bursts of energy often. And when Mars is in my sign, I feel like I get them a lot more often. I get a lot more done, and it feels really good. For Gemini, it can be exhausting because most of the Geminis that I know are full of energy already. So to have an energetic influence constantly there, just really, I bet you guys are exhausted, and it will be over sooner rather than later. I promise. But we do continue to have Mars in Gemini, and Mars is very much focused on self. And I feel like part of this has to do with self-care. And the more self-care you do, the less likely you are to burn yourself out. But I also feel that a lot of this has to do with self-exploration too, and putting that energy into self-understanding as well as self-improvement. We talk a lot about self-improvement, but self-understanding is actually a lot more important. You can't improve anything until you understand really who you are when you think about it. And I think a lot of us forget that part. You have to look at yourself honestly for not to beat yourself up or berate yourself, obviously, but in order to grow, you need to be able to identify honestly the things that you need to work on and the aspects of yourself that you need to use a little more to your benefit, if that makes sense. Mars square with Venus is a little bit tricky because it sort of feels like you don't have the support that you need to be able to go through this self-exploration, which is kind of interesting, really. Being in that situation multiple times myself, I think we all find ourselves in that situation more than once. The truth is, in hindsight, not in the moment, but in hindsight, I realized that there really was nobody that could help me with this. I mean, I'm a hot mess here all by myself. Who's gonna understand any of that if I don't even understand any of that? And for most Geminis, you have so many multifaceted different faces, personalities, moods, and things like that. How can you really expect anybody else to understand that when it comes down to it? So in a way, I feel like that prevention of support is helping you, because this is all about you. You can't have somebody just come in and fix it for you. That's not going to work, right? You need to actually sit down yourself. This is your journey, and commit to it, regardless of what anybody else is doing. The good news is Mars sextile with Jupiter is helpful because Jupiter's all about expansion, and it's also pointed in your support system. And while you stop going and looking for it, the support that you need really does come to you. And it almost always does. You've heard of the phrase, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. It's absolutely true for all of us. And the teacher could come in forms that you wouldn't even really identify as the teacher. They might even just blow your mind, but that's the whole point. When it blows your mind, you're going to pay attention to it and you're going to remember it. It's an exciting journey, a little bit scary, but it's an exciting journey. Embrace it and see. You never know how it's going to affect you, how it's going to improve you, how it's going to change you for the better. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Cancer, focus is on the past this week, and Pallas Athene continues to be in your sign, although is retrograde this week. With Pallas Athene being the warrior queen, that retrograde really turns that into what looks like a woman who just doesn't know what to do, completely has zero control over her environment, over her situations, just doesn't know what to do, almost the damsel in distress sort of an energy. That mixed with Cancer, not necessarily a really good combination, especially when you're looking to the past for all of those instances where you needed help and you didn't get it, kind of a feel. Unfortunately, when you look at your past through those eyes, you start to see that you're more and more and more helpless, that you have less and less and less power. And that doesn't necessarily help you if you're in that space currently right now. So I would look at this more as an opportunity to be able to change your view of how things were. A lot of times our memories are all our perception, and we don't necessarily remember them in the way that they actually were. We remember our feelings. We remember how we saw it, maybe as children. We're not necessarily remembering it for exactly what it is. So this week, I feel like with that coming up, I feel like there's going to be instances for you that are going to trigger some of those memories of being let down, of not being heard, of not being supported. And this may cause you to really amplify those feelings in situations currently taking place this week. And when you amplify that, it sort of takes a situation that isn't really that big of a deal and blows it up into this really huge deal. And when you blow it up into a really huge deal, it's really harder to let go of. So this week, it's really important to remember that you can't be a warrior and put that energy into changing what happened. You absolutely can take that energy and try to change what is happening. And the more your focus is there and less on, I wouldn't be like this if this didn't happen, kind of a feeling, or kind of a situation, the more successful you will be in the long run. And yes, it absolutely does take work when you're going through a mental space like that, where it's overly emotional. It literally feels like it's burying you. You literally feel like you have no control, and you cannot get yourself out of it. And in all honesty, every time I've ever been in that situation, it always comes down to that day where I say, you know what, I just can't be here anymore. I have to get up and do something. And it takes baby steps, but eventually I can move on and let it go. And that's really what you need to do. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Leo, focus is on the home this week, and we continue to have the Lilith or dark moon, as she's also called, influencing your sign, at least at the beginning of the week. No, she is gonna stay all week long because she's going retrograde this week. And her retrograde, as she goes into retrograde, she moves sort of less focus on home and brings more of a focus on how you think about things, or how we process information, kind of a thing. And in retrograde, with the Lilith being all about change and regeneration, being retrograde sort of feels like you can't change things, if that makes sense. And so it's very comfortable. Her placement is very comfortable at the beginning of the week, but as we progress through the week, it becomes more and more uncomfortable. And what this may, or how I should say this actually may play out for you guys this week, is as you get closer towards the end of the week, you may find yourself overthinking a lot more, or getting into that sort of what I call the hamster wheel, where you're stuck on something, usually emotionally. It's usually something that hurts you or makes you angry or something, and you're just spinning that wheel and spinning that wheel and going around and around and around. And it's really hard to let that go. I think it's really hard for everybody to let that go. I know better, and it's still hard for me to let that go. And I feel that there's a couple of different reasons for that. The first of those reasons is that this is the way we process our feelings and our anger. And it is actually a healthy thing until it goes on and on and on and on, and it starts to infiltrate into the different things that you have to do. So I'm a big fan of putting myself on a time limit. I am going to do this and be angry for up until 2 o'clock. And then at 2 o'clock, I'm going to stop the hamster wheel. And you do have absolute control over that if you choose to have control over it. You stop the hamster wheel. You force yourself to mentally focus on something other than the hamster wheel if you still feel like it's still going. And the more you do this, the easier it becomes. The more often you say, I'm going to put a time limit on it, and then stop. Or in some cases, the more often you just say, you know what, I'm driving myself crazy over this for nothing. There's nothing I can do about it. And you sort of put it away yourself. So it does have its advantages as you get into the habit of doing this more and more. This is also the only way that you can get any kind of control over how your brain works. Everybody that I talk to says this is just how my brain works, and there's nothing I can do about it, including me. I mean, honestly, in the beginning, I said the same thing. I said, my brain's always acted like this. What am I supposed to do with it? You are in charge of the brain, not the other way around. The brain's not controlling you. You are controlling the brain. So when you say, enough is enough, I don't want to think about this anymore, I visualize putting in a box and shutting the lid of the box, and it's not coming back out until I open the lid of the box. These types of visualization tools also help. It gives you something to do, because really, what are you going to do? But, this, okay, stop. No, that hurts after a while. You don't want to do that. So visualization tools help because it gives you something to do in order to come to a successful conclusion. And you should actually do whatever is most comfortable and whatever you feel works the most. I can't tell you how many people come to me and they just don't know. You give them a couple of tips, some of them it works, some of them it doesn't. And they're looking specifically for people to tell them what to do rather than coming up with the solution on their own. Honestly, the solution is most powerful when it is yours. That doesn't mean don't use other people's ideas. You can use somebody else's idea and make it your own. And that's why when I do the teach others how to do the ground and bubble technique, It's very important that you make it your own. The more you make it your own, the more often you're going to use it. The more often you're going to benefit from it. And grounding and bubbling also helps to quiet this down and stop the hamster race. So this is your challenge for this week, unfortunately, but it is a good challenge because the more you practice it, the better you'll be. And the better you are, the less likely you're going to continue to get distracted by these angry thoughts. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Virgo, we continue to be focused on those you love this week. This is the last week of that focus, and we also continue to not have any planets in Virgo this week as well. So not necessarily a bad thing. Focus being on those you love this week, though. I really feel for you guys. You guys are such social people, and I do love that. And you love very deeply and very openly in many cases. But as much as you love people, sometimes those people that you love just get on your nerves after a while, and it becomes very difficult to deal with them. In some cases, it's because the relationship isn't exactly healthy. Maybe there are elements of a toxic relationship there. In other cases, a lot of times, and I see Virgos doing this a lot, actually, a really lot. It's all about communication. Somebody does something that annoys you. And if you don't communicate it and you try to ignore it and it just bottles up and it continues to annoy you that much more, and you're just frustrated and annoyed until you explode and go, oh my God, stop doing that. I can't take it anymore. Right. And then you blow up, and then the other person's like, I wasn't even doing anything. I was just just tapping my fingers, whatever. It doesn't need to be that way. If there is something that is annoying about somebody you love, for heaven's sakes, tell them before you blow up. Sit down with them and say, I'm really sorry, but it is so distracting when you're tapping your nails when I'm talking because I can't really focus. You never know. They may not even realize. I do that all the time, actually, tapping my fingernails just to hear them. And I'm not realizing that it's bothering anybody or anything. I'm just kind of in my own little bubble over here. Clueless is what I call it. And they may be clueless too. And if you do that, you can avoid the argument. You can avoid being frustrated about it anymore. You can avoid all kinds of things if you simply just communicate with the other person in a non-threatening way. Of course, if you're going to come up to them threatening, obviously there's going to be an argument there. You don't want to go to extremes. The more you can make your life easier, the better. And you want to maintain relationships with these people. It has nothing to do with losing their relationship. And if you want to maintain with relationships with people, communication is the key to do that. If it is an extreme situation where you have tried to communicate with that person, or this is not so much an annoyance, but something that is really just sucking you dry, I feel that Virgos, more so than any other sign, really struggle with letting go of relationships. Not necessarily because they're so attached, but because of the guilt. They'll feel guilty if anything happens. And when you're in a toxic relationship, 9 times out of 10, that person is making you think that something is going to happen if you leave them. And so it becomes a very difficult decision to make. But being in that same place at one time myself, there comes down to only 2 options. You cut the relationship and risk something happening, and chances are it did eventually, or you continue on and you're right there with a front row seat to watch something happen, because it's probably going to happen anyways, whether you're there or not. That's what it comes down to. Unfortunately, it sucks, but there are people that want to grow and there are people that don't. And if you're a person that wants to grow, people that don't want to grow are not going to help with that journey. And honestly, that is how you have to look at it. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Libra, focus is on those you love this week, and Ceres continues to influence that in retrograde. Now, we haven't really talked about Ceres in retrograde too much, at least I don't recall that we have. Ceres, being known as the Great Mother, has a very nurturing influence. Retrograde, it almost seems like you're dealing with those issues of not having that sort of nurturing coming back at you, if that makes sense. To me, this is the great mother issue, honestly, that I think every single mother goes through, is loving people so much it just hurts. Your heart feels like it's going to explode. And then the great disappointment that oftentimes comes from that. Now, don't get me wrong, okay? Don't get me wrong. I have a million instances of pride and appreciation and love for my children. But I have also a million instances where they just acted like I was really nobody special, even though I brought them into the world and I changed their behinds and I taught them how to walk and I taught them everything in order to be able to be the adults and survive in this world now. It's a big disappointment. And I feel like Libras go through this a lot. You guys put so much into people, and when you don't see that being reciprocated back at you, it really just hurts. And I feel like that's really what we're looking at this week, is dealing with the pain of feeling like you're doing everything for everybody and they're just taking advantage of that, if that makes sense. And that actually might be a bit of a good thing when you think about it, because sometimes it takes that pain in order for you to really get that you need to change something. Especially if this is a common problem. If it's a, every now and then problem, it happens. If this is a common problem with somebody, they need to know that it's time to show a little bit of appreciation every now and then. I mean, for crying out loud. I know Libras that do everything for everybody and never even get a thank you. And it's just not okay for somebody to do that. But at the same time, if you're going to keep allowing that behavior over and over and over again, that behavior is never going to go away. So this may be one of those instances that comes up for a reason. It's coming up now to get you to that point where you're just so angry that it's happening that you put your foot down and say, hey, no, you're not treating me like this anymore. Okay. Maybe that's what just needs to happen. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Scorpio, we're going to kick off the week with the moon in Scorpio, which is an unpleasant, of course, as it moves into opposition with Uranus. Uranus being focused on our trauma closet, and of course, Scorpio and the moon. And of course, Scorpio and the moon are focused on your day-to-day schedule. So a couple of things are going to come up with this for the first couple of days, having this moon problem in your sign here. It's gonna feel like I want to say that this sort of puts you in a place where maybe you've made plans with somebody and they're consistently canceling at the last minute, or they don't. It's one of those situations where you always make sure to follow through with what you're saying, or you say you're going to do, but this other person isn't necessarily doing that. And this creates an emotional response because it is offensive after a while. I can totally see where I would be offended too. I put this effort into you and you can't put the same effort into me. It's really frustrating. Now, the moon's trine with Venus is actually really helpful in this because it's showing you support. And this is these two feminine energies coming together makes it a very fluid and a very emotional and a very creative in some way support as well. To me, I sort of look at that as look to your girls for support in some way, but I also look at this in terms of not so much focusing on the negativity that's happening, but focusing on what you have or shifting that focus to something more fun. Honestly, I also tend to look at it as maybe this person keeps canceling for a reason. Energetically, they're just not the person that you want to meld your energy with right now. And you Scorpios are very intuitive people. Because of that, that makes you very energetically open as well. And that can get a little tricky sometimes. So it might actually be happening for good reason. As we move into Monday, the moon does move into a square with Saturn and the sun, both of which are focused on career. So we're talking work here, and I'm seeing this playing out again as work changing your schedule. So you've got everything planned out. Fixed signs, we have to kind of stick to that plan. Flexibility is not necessarily easy for fixed signs. But if you've got somebody coming in and rearranging your schedule and there's nothing you can do about that, all that does is breed frustration. You could focus on the frustration all day and have a bad day, or you can look at the moon's grand sextile with Mercury, Pluto, Neptune, and Venus. Again, we're lining up favorably with Venus here, still in a trine there, only we've added to it, which is really good. Now, Mercury and Pluto are focused on long-term goals. This means that, okay, maybe work has rearranged your schedule, but it also opens up time for you to focus on something that you didn't think you would have time for today. Think about it that way. And we also, of course, that trine with Neptune and Venus sort of shows us that support system, brings in that creativity again, that creative element, that very feminine element. So I feel like this really, the moon's lesson for these 2 days really is all about be careful what you focus on. If you're going to focus on the bad things, then you're not really going to get the value out of the good things that are coming, because either way they're going to come. Do you want to make the most of that energy, or do you want to maybe miss out on some of that? I don't think you want to miss out. As we move into the rest of the week, things do calm down a little bit. Focus continues to be on your schedule, and it looks like your schedule is going to be pretty clear without a whole bunch of changes, maybe one or two, but that's about it. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And we're going to move into Sagittarius. Focus is on relationships, although the moon brings a little bit of your day-to-day schedule focus into the mix on Tuesday when she moves into your sign and moves into opposition with Mars. Mars focus is right on the cusp of self and your trauma closet, which is a little bit scary, actually, when you think about it. Because of course the moon is going to make this very emotional thing. We're looking at triggers, so we're talking about a current situation that is triggering old feelings that are similar to what you're going through right now in a way. And I really feel that it's calling you out on the carpet in some way, which is a very uncomfortable place to be. And most of the Sagittarians that I know would be fighting that tooth and nails. Not about me. It's you're trying to sort of bop it back at somebody else or put that blame on somebody else. It's not about you. But I feel like actually that's not what you're supposed to do this time. I really feel that this is more about holding yourself accountable. Now, I'm not looking at this necessarily as you screwed up and you have to be accountable for it. I feel like when it comes to relationships, when it comes to your time schedule, sometimes we screw up. It's true. Other times there are other things that take place that are out of our control. So we have to be accountable for what is our screw up, and we have to let go of control of the things that are out of our control. we tend to get that a little bit screwy and put the blame on other people for what we need to be accountable for and try and control the things that we can't control. Honestly, as humans do things wrong, like over and over and over again, and just for whatever reason can't see that we're doing it. You got to flip that around. If you made a mistake, hold yourself accountable for it. It's the most important thing that you can do for yourself, is to hold yourself accountable for it. If it's not you and it's out of your control, let it go. There's no reason for you to waste energy getting frustrated over something that you couldn't change. The good news is the moon moves into a grand sextile with Mercury and Pluto. Pluto is actually going to help you by providing some support to get you through this. So I feel like this situation also has a lot to do with just having too much on your plate to begin with. And it's really easy to make mistakes when that happens, unfortunately. So getting the support that you need is really important. Mercury's influence is on your long-term goals. This is very interesting to me, actually. In some cases, I feel like the arguments that we have, the struggles that we have, the power struggles specifically that we tend to have, really do just take our focus away from things that are really important, you know. So it just, all it really does is it stops us from actually doing something productive. And I feel like this is really sort of explaining that in a way, because with Mercury focused on your long-term goals, it's kind of saying stop putting all of your energy into, again, the things that you can't control, and start focusing your energy on the things that you can, which is looking into your long-term goals. And in there somewhere is pointing to something that you're responsible for that you're ignoring, which I'm not saying that all Sagittarians do that, but some do. Procrastination is kind of a part of being a Sagittarius, although you're not the only ones that procrastinate. Trust me on that. The moon continues this opposition into Wednesday with Mars, where now we're really focused on relationships, but Mars is still on the cusp of self as well as that trauma closet. So triggers definitely for those couple of days. The moon also moves into a square with Neptune and Venus, both of which are in perfect conjunction with each other on this day. And they're right on the cusp of career and support. So I feel like how this is going to play out is, again, one of those instances where you just don't feel like you're being supported in what you're doing. And this is actually something that stops a lot of people from kind of progressing in themselves. Is this, well, it's like diet things, right? I can't be on a diet because I have a husband and children, and I wind up having to cook 5 different meals, you know. Actually, what you're saying is you don't want to have to put in that extra work to make yourself a salad instead of eating macaroni and cheese, period. And it sucks, but you know, that's the reality. The reality is that being on a diet sucks. Nobody wants to do it. If you have to do it, you have to do it. If you don't have to do it, it's really easy to talk yourself out of it. So, that makes things a little bit difficult, but as the moon moves out of there, the difficulties also move out of there too. And you continue just to be focused on those relationships. And I feel like this is a good opportunity after the moon comes in and causes all of these little difficulties and challenges. Once you get past that, it's a really good idea to sort of focus back on it from an outside perspective, not with your anger or your feelings, but to look at it from an outside perspective and really look at it honestly. This helps you to learn from the situation so that you can try to change the way it happened next time and maybe make it a little bit easier for you, if that makes sense. And that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Capricorn, focus continues to be on finances, and Pluto's influence is right on the cusp of long-term goals and finances. So we're really looking at your long-term financial goals this week. Perfect place for Capricorns to be, of course. And Pluto's sextile with Venus as well as Neptune on the cusp of your career as well as your support system. Now, I see some creative support actually, or somebody coming in to sort of offer creative ways to budget your money or to invest your money, ways that might be a little bit out of the norm for you, if that makes sense, and normally would be something that's really uncomfortable and you probably don't want to pursue, but it's definitely something to at least learn about before you make the decision, if that makes sense. You don't want to shut it out right away. um Pluto's square, no, Pluto does not have a square. Never mind. Cancel that, cancel that, cancel that. Pluto is just making things easier, not making things complicated. The moon, however, is going to come into your sign Thursday, Friday, and make things a little bit complicated. And we'll start with the moon square with Jupiter. We're talking about finances here. Jupiter is all about expansion, specifically your support system around your financial goals. Might look like you don't really have a whole much of a big support system around your financial goals, or actually this may play out with working with somebody towards your financial goals that doesn't necessarily work out for you. It's almost like you're really seeing things about this person that just aren't necessarily going to work for how you want to budget your money, kind of a thing. So it sort of does shine light on something that's not necessarily good, but I feel like that light needs to be shown in order for you to find somebody that's going to work better for you, if that makes sense. So challenges happen for a reason sometimes. The good news is the moon's trine with Uranus. Uranus is focused on our inner trauma. And what's interesting about that actually is I was a part of a life coaching group a really long time ago where we did a session on mindsets from childhood around money. And I didn't think at all at the time that you could develop a mindset around money in childhood. It just didn't make sense to me. Money isn't as important to children as it is to adults. And that's actually not true. I mean, I forgot about a lot of things, including the first business that I created when I was 13 years old. And because I was ignoring my chores at home, because I was running my babysitting business, I was forced to hand over everything that I made to somebody else to make that up, kind of a thing. It was abusive, it was wrong, and it created a mindset that no matter how hard I work, I can never benefit from my money. And that was really a killer in terms of making money. And it was a very powerful thing. And when you understand how much these mindsets hold you back from making changes, and the more you understand that releasing these old mindsets help you to move forward in change, it really is like looking at the whole thing from a different point of view. And that's really going to be helpful when you're faced with these new creative ideas to help you achieve those goals. So, that being said, that's what I have for you guys this week. And we are moving on to Aquarius. Focus is on long-term goals. We have Mercury in Aquarius, and I did promise that that square between the sun and Uranus would be over, and I did. It did, and so I of course kept my promise. But Mercury has to take his turn as well. Not quite the whole week, just for a few days this week, but then it's over. Officially, it's over. And of course, we're going to end the week with the moon in our sign as well, which in conjunction with Mercury is, it's good and bad, to be honest with you. We're both, of course, going to be in a square with Uranus, it's very strange, actually. Uranus is Aquarius's ruling planet. And to be in a situation, especially with the focus being on our inner trauma, which is not necessarily something that Aquarians really want to spend a lot of time dealing with. Certainly not during Aquarius season. This is our time to party, you know? And then the moon kind of sort of attaches itself to that and makes it even more emotional with Mercury involved. It really brings this sense, this feeling, or a lot of triggers around not being heard in some cases. Aquarians are communicators. They can be very good communicators. They can over communicate and confuse the hell out of people too. And so I really feel that this challenge is sort of bringing up these instances where it feels like you're not being heard, because it's possible that you may not be communicating it in the right way for them to receive the information. I think a lot of people walk around going, people need to understand me. No, that's not how the world works. We have to find a way to communicate with everybody else. And if we're different, that's okay. We can embrace our differences, but we also have to be respectful of other people too. So I really, let me just say that this is a big struggle for me all the time, all the time. And I'm still working towards finding ways to be able to get through this particular problem. But really what it comes down to is it's an emotional problem for me. And it's not something that everybody else has to fix their issues because they don't understand me. It really is a way for me to look at different communication patterns around me to learn what works and what doesn't. Because if I want to be heard, I need to say it in the way that people are going to be able to understand it. And talking Japanese to somebody who's not Japanese is just not going to work. And sometimes the way we word things, it does sound like we're talking Japanese. At least nobody can understand what we're saying. So it's kind of similar. The good news is Mercury's grand sextile with Mars and Jupiter, and of course the moon puts her little influence into that as well to help us out a little bit. Again, we're focused on long-term goals. Jupiter is all about expansion, and we're looking at expanding your horizons, specifically around your support systems. And Mars, which is now very much also focused on that inner trauma place. It doesn't seem like any kind of focus on inner trauma is helpful to you, but it is. The more you can release that trauma, the less it holds you down. And the less it holds you down, the farther you can go. As you get older, we get more tired, we get slower. If we're being held down with all of this stuff, it just makes it so much worse. To be pretty soon you're just barely going to be able to walk across the room. I'm telling you, that's what it feels like, because that is how it is. So the more that you can release, the lighter it is, and the longer you can continue to go on, and the less it holds you back and gets in the way and makes you second guess yourself and go through that whole mental ridiculousness in the first place. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And finally, we are moving on to Pisces. We are literally, this is the last week before we kick off Pisces season, because Pisces season kicks off the very next week, like literally at the very beginning of the week. So not quite there yet, but we are almost there. We continue to have Venus in Pisces this month. I'm sorry, this week. That will change as she moves on into Aries next week. We, of course, continue to have Neptune in Pisces, and that is not going to change throughout the rest of the year either. So we are in for the long haul with that. And we have the Sun and Saturn both on the cusp of Pisces as well. So not quite there yet. They'll both be jumping in. The Sun will definitely be jumping in next week. as well as Saturn, who will be jumping into Pisces here in the next couple of weeks. Also, I'm excited for you guys, but I think I'm more excited with Saturn moving on, because in Aquarius, it made things a little bit crazy. Hopefully, Pisces will sort of calm it down just a little bit there. We have a lot going on, and yet not a lot going on, really, because I think the big thing here is Venus and Neptune and their square with Pluto. And Pluto is really very much focused on finances. When you have Neptune and Venus, and their placement is very much focused on career and your support system in many ways, specifically your support system around your career. Now, these, of course, are planets that are working together in this particular instance. But I really feel here it's important for you to broaden your horizons when it comes to your support system. And I think that Pisces is, every Pisces that I know knows everybody. We'll just put it that way. They're very social signs. They're very helpful signs. They're the people that would give you the shirt off their back, if you needed it, kind of a thing. It really feels difficult when you don't feel like you have that same support that you wind up have been giving to everybody else for who knows how long. But I feel like this is more about, you really kind of need to get creative about how you're seeing your support system, if that makes sense. If you're looking at who should be supporting you, versus the people that are supporting you, you're going to be disappointed. And we're trying to avoid that disappointment, if that makes sense. Also, there are very creative ways that people support you. So it may not be exactly the support that you're looking for, but they are still there, doing what they can or what they know how to do, if that makes sense. So you kind of have to look at it that way as well, so that it doesn't seem quite so much like it's just all you and you're alone doing everything, kind of a thing. In terms of this sextile with Pluto, Pluto is all about change, transformation, your personal power. When we're focused on finances and in some case personal growth, what's interesting about this is these changes in how you see these situations and your mindset really does give you power to change other aspects of your life. Now, if you're in a particular situation where it just feels like there's nothing but that situation and you have zero control over any of it, it feels like you have no hope. And when you feel like you have no hope, you either are not focused in the right way, and so you're making mistakes, or your mind is in so many different places that you're dropping the ball in other places. And the biggest problem of this, of course, is the fact that when you feel like you have no power to change it, you also don't really motivate yourself to change it. So when it comes down to it, I've heard so many situations with so many different people who say, well, this is what I'm stuck doing right now, and there's nothing I can do. There's always something that you can do. Rather than focusing on the nothing, focus on what you can do and make sure that you do that, as much as possible. Support or no support. Sometimes we're put in these situations where we don't have any support, because this is our lesson. It's up to us to take care of this, and nobody else is going to be able to take care of this in the way that it needs to be taken care of. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And that's what I have for everybody. Thanks so much for hanging out. For the horoscopes this week, I'm Melissa Bruce, the Heavy Metal Psychic. Check out my website, heavymetalpsychic.com, and the memberships, workshops, and all the things that are currently available and about to be available here in the next couple of months. You guys make it a great week, everybody.